He should be in here, though.
Yeah,
He should be.
Definitely he should be in here.
For anyone who has ever carefully scrutinized an old black and white photo looking for a familiar face,
He has to be here, right?
this is the moment you do it for.
This one.
This one?
Yeah.
Let's see. We found him in the
This one
picture.
is him, definitely. Yeah, no, definitely that was him. Yeah, that was him.
Him, Private Frederick Lee, a name no one in this room knew 3 months ago, but someone they can't stop thinking about now. Frederick Lee was one of 424,000 who served overseas for Canada during the First World War, but just one of a few hundred who were of Chinese descent, and life for them back then in BC was very different.
Hearing about the long history of the Chinese in Kamloops here, they weren't allowed to live on the other side of the river.
And Jack Jin says their dead couldn't be buried in the community graveyard, so more than 200 of them are here in a Chinese cemetery where many of the plots are marked with simple wooden stakes.
It's so much history here, yet it's so sad. This is Canadian history.
In the 1800s, the Chinese who migrated to Canada worked in mines and on the railway for little money and often in cramped, unsafe conditions. Lee was born in Canada in 1895, but like others back then, he still would have been considered an alien and wasn't allowed to vote. Despite that, Lee, who worked as a farmer, enlisted to fight for Canada overseas in March 1916.
Just a Chinese-Canadian kid from 100 years ago volunteering to participate in a war on a call for Canada. And I didn't know we had Chinese-Canadian kids participating in the First World War. All we had on Frederick Lee was private, volunteered.
Jin, a philanthropist with a self-professed love of Canadian history, was recently asked to help piece together Lee's story and eagerly accepted. While he fought at Vimy Ridge in 1917, Lee's name recently surfaced because he was part of a largely unknown battle that was commemorated in August at a memorial in France.
It's a remarkable battle, and it was basically forgotten.
Mark Hutchings is with the Hill 70 Project. He says the battle, which took place in August 1917, was the first time Canadian troops were led by a Canadian commander, Sir Arthur Currie. He'd been asked to attack the French town of Lens.
He went and had a look, a reconnaissance of the area, and said, ooh, this would be a meat grinder. We would be doomed to fail the same way the French failed and the British failed, and they suffered 50,000 casualties in their two actions. And so he didn't want to do the same thing.
Instead, he decided to attack a hill above the town. It was known as Hill 70 because it was 70 meters above sea level.
It was an operational success in that for the next 10 days, the Germans counterattacked 21 times trying to get that hill back. The Germans lost somewhere between 20 and 40,000, depending on which historian you read.
Some of that history will now be taught in schools as part of the Hill 70 Memorial Project. 1,877 Canadian soldiers died during that battle, including 21-year-old Frederick Lee.
I think it's important for all Chinese Canadians to know who Frederick Lee was. I see Frederick Lee as a metaphor for the hard work and struggle of the early Chinese. Not only him, but his father, his mother before him.
And we should be so proud of him to be in the Kamloops history.
When Elsie Chung heard about Lee's story, she wanted to know more about him. His name is already on the cenotaph in Kamloops, but the Chinese community never knew one of their own had served in the First World War.
We thought that because in Kamloops it's only a small town and they want to have so many soldiers, so they just take him. So I don't know how many Chinese will actually be being accepted at that time in 1916, but he got through, right? So, and yeah, I'm just so proud of him.
After Lee's father died, his mother and most of his siblings returned to China, but Elsie was able to track down Lee's 85-year-old nephew. He showed her a postcard Lee sent from training in 1916. He said things were going well. What have you learned throughout the whole process?
History. Knowing that you really can track down somebody, but still lots of mysteries that we haven't find out yet.
Kamloops boys.
Kamloops boys, right?
She and the others want to piece together the rest of Lee's life. They plan to build a gazebo in the Chinese cemetery as a way to honor him and to sacrifice during a battle most still don't know about. Briar Stewart, CBC News, Kamloops.